Everyone, please welcome Liz Arcta to the stage.
So which one is the,
That moves forward.
that's forward, and that's the laser
That's
pointer.
laser. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Yep. Cool. All right. Hi. Yep, this is Ditch the Legacy, why it's time to move past SFTP. So I am Liz Arcta. I'm an onboarding architect here at Files.com. What I do is I work with our new customers and help them figure out how to best configure their Files.com site to work for their workflows. So we're here today because many teams, probably you, included, still rely on SFTP just because it's familiar. I mean, you've been using it for decades. Maybe you just haven't really thought about maybe using something else. But it's not always the best tool for the job anymore. Sometimes it is. Some jobs, it is the best tool. Sometimes it's not. So we're just going to look into that and maybe ask the question, is there something better we could be using? Because the way that people work today, when you factor in modern security requirements, user expectations, complexity, file sizes, and integration with other systems, SFTP isn't always the best choice. So we're going to look at alternatives, options that are more secure, but especially easier to use, where the user experience is a lot better, maybe the file speed is a lot faster, and just more aligned with how everybody uses technology today. So we'll look at some of the different alternatives, when to use them, and how they can reduce overhead without adding risk. And I'm actually going to talk about 4 actual customers of Files.com and how they stopped using SFTP and how they got a better experience by doing that. So I know that you were not warned. There's a pop quiz. The first question, I hope this one is easy. What year is it? 2025. Yeah, I hear you. It is 2025. The next question is a little bit harder. Does anyone know what year SFTP was initially developed? 1997. So SFTP was created in 1997. So if you remember 1997, that was the same year as the movies Titanic and Spice World. Were very big at the box office. The first Harry Potter book was published for the first time in the UK in 1997. So in addition, DVD players were available for the first time. So before 1997, people did not have DVD players. So that came out in the 90s. 1997 was 28 years ago. Back then, SFTP was cutting edge. It was totally rad. But 1997 was a different time. Don't answer this question, but are you still doing all the same things you did back in the 90s? Has the way that you interact with computers and technology changed just a little bit since then? Did you have these stacks of CDs on your desk that maybe you don't have anymore? Did you have a touch-tone phone that you don't have anymore? So technology maybe has changed a little bit since 1997. And also the way that businesses use digital files, that has changed just a little bit too. So before I go too negative, I know that tons of people rely on SFTP every day, and it does have some challenges, but it's ubiquitous because it works. You can rely on it. It does still work in tons of situations. So before you start saying, no, you can't take it away from me, we definitely understand, and if SFTP is working, you don't need to change it. So some examples when SFTP is a good fit. So for instance, if you have a vendor or if you have a partner that is absolutely calling the shots, they're the ones who have maybe a little more power in the relationship, or for whatever reason they insist on SFTP and you need to work with them, well, then SFTP is what you're going to use. You've just got to do it the way that they want it done. So you don't always get to choose at all. Another situation might be if you're still working with legacy systems. So if you have a legacy system that only speaks SFTP and you need to like communicate with that legacy system, well, then you just got to use SFTP. Or if your partner has a legacy system that only uses SFTP, obviously you have to use SFTP in that situation. So some of these legacy systems, you just can't get rid of them. Maybe they're very brittle, and you might worry that if they fall over and break if you touch them or if you look at them too hard. But if they speak SFTP, you need the legacy system. You just got to use SFTP in that situation. Networking constraints. So depending on the organization, your organization or your partners, they may have more or less complex networking requirements. And so sometimes the network is just the network. And so SFTP is the only way to move in and out of that network. So if you just need to travel to the outside world, SFTP might be the only way to get there. Or it might be the only way that your partner allows traffic to come in. So, if you're riding in a rickety old jalopy to get through port 22, that still is better than not going anywhere. So SFTP can still really work in that situation. So basically what we're trying to say, if you have the control, so if you have control over both ends of a process, or if you're working with your internal teams, or if you are the one calling the shots in the relationship with a partner or a vendor, like you're the more powerful person, you're the dog, they're the tail. So these might be situations where you might consider whether SFTP could be replaced by something better. So I'm just going to give you some examples just to get you thinking about this. But again, if SFTP works, if you don't have any pains around your use of SFTP, don't worry about it. It's great, it's working. So you don't have to fix what ain't broke. But in other situations, sometimes SFTP isn't working very well and it's not really suited to the modern world. So for instance, how many times have you had to manually reset a partner's credentials? They forgot their password, or for whatever reason they need to change their SFTP password. Usually that's something that you have to manually reset. Or if they have a policy of using SSH keys, or if you have a policy of SSH keys, how difficult sometimes is to explain that to people, what an SSH key is, how to generate one, like all of that whole explaining process sometimes can be time-consuming or confusing. There also can be a lot of manual troubleshooting involved with SFTP. So for instance, if a transfer fails, how long does that usually take to resolve? Even if the error is not on your side, because of course it's not, because you have files.com. But if there is a failure, it takes time to look into that. We have extremely detailed SFTP logs, which are awesome. But wouldn't it be better if you never had to look at another log ever again? Or if your partners never had to look at another log ever again? And even though files.com support is awesome and they're super fast, it still takes a little bit of time for them to look into anything that might go wrong with SFTP. And it's not effortless. You open a support ticket and talk to people. Wouldn't it be nice if you just didn't have to do that at all? Again, networking. What is the average wait time for a networking team to open port 22? Sometimes networking teams aren't always lightning fast. So sometimes it can take a little while to just get that port open. Or if their networking team needs to whitelist your IPs in their firewall. So sometimes SFTP can be difficult because you just have these manual networking updates that you have to put in place. And then, speaking of 1997, does anyone remember the size of your computer's hard drive in 1997? The average PC had 32 megabytes of RAM and 1.2 gigabytes of storage. Can you imagine that? 1.2 gigabytes of storage for the entire PC. Now, at files.com, we have a lot of customers who are trying to manage petabytes of data, petabytes of storage. So file sizes are just a little bit larger than they were in 1997, but we still need to move those files around. SFTP is a little bit slower than some of these other protocols at moving really large files, but the files aren't going to get any smaller in the future. So, okay, here's my first example of a place where you can ditch SFTP and think about using something else. So Diwakar did a great job of showing you about our desktop app and how great it is, how it is just like driving around in a shiny red sports car because it's super fast. So if you're not convinced by that, let me reiterate. If you are still using FileZilla or WinSCP for manual uploads from your environment to your files.com site, switch to the desktop app. Hopefully some of you have already downloaded it in this room and have installed it and are starting to use it. Because, like they said in that presentation, the desktop app connects to the files.com site using our API. So it uses a different protocol. It doesn't use the SFTP protocol. It uses API, which is why it's so much faster. So there is a major boost in transfer speeds, as you saw in the demo, and especially for very large files. So we're optimizing that connection, and we're making it as fast as it can possibly be. There's a mounted drive and a 2-pane interface. And then something that's really important for some of our customers is that it's very easy to use single sign-on and 2FA with the desktop app. Not so easy or even impossible to use that with SFTP. So if you're still using FileZilla, CyberDuck, any of those, and you can use the desktop app instead, just go ahead and switch to the desktop app. Some very few small number of our customers have a configuration where the desktop app just doesn't work for them. Sometimes that's their security policies on their machines. If you have to use a third-party SFTP client, use CyberDuck. Like Diwakar said, it's the fastest of the options. So CyberDuck is still faster than FileZilla. Okay, but I'm going to tell you about a real customer. And I'm going to name names because we're very proud of them. And they're doing awesome. So Ross Video. Ross Video designs, manufactures, and supports video production products like switchers, graphics, and robotic cameras. So cool thing about them, they are the #1 supplier of live production solutions to sports stadiums. So pretty big deal. They're doing awesome. They have a very large graphics department. So they had 150 users in this graphics department, and they all were using FileZilla to transfer files back and forth from their local environment to files.com. So they had this entire department that was using FileZilla. And so they were, they were pretty happy with it. They knew what to do. They were familiar. They didn't have to think about it on a daily basis. Maybe it was slower than what they wanted, but it was okay. However, Ross made the smart move. This was an awesome move. They implemented single sign-on. So they were rolling out single sign-on across the company. However, FTP clients like FileZilla don't support single sign-on. So this is something to really keep in mind. If you have a user account on files.com that is authenticating via single sign-on, you can't use single sign-on with an FTP client like FileZilla. So if the folks in this department wanted to keep using FileZilla, that meant that Ross Video would have had to maintain 2 separate user accounts for each person. So they would have had to have, one user account with single sign-on that those folks could use for web access to log in via their browser. And then they would have had to have another user account where they authenticate with a password or an SSH key and just for SFTP access. So, that's ridiculous. Like, that's 2 user accounts for each person. We wouldn't consider that a good option for anyone, and they agreed. So, even if they had thought that that was a good idea, or if anyone thought that was a good idea, they also were enforcing 2FA everywhere, which is awesome. 2FA is more secure, right? However, it's very difficult to use 2FA with FileZilla and other SFTP clients. So why go to all the effort of implementing single sign-on and 2FA if you have 150 people who aren't using it? So they started using the files.com desktop app. And so natively, the desktop app supports single sign-on and enforces 2FA. So it's very easy to use 2FA with the desktop app because, again, it's not connecting via SFTP, it's connecting via the API. So you can have a single user account with single sign-on authentication and 2FA, and they can use those same credentials to log in via the web in their browser, but they can also use the exact same credentials, the same user account, to use the desktop app. And so that's just a huge security boost for you, and that's a real good usability boost for them. And so, like I said, they had been using FileZilla. They really liked that two-pane view, that two-pane interface, so they got to keep that familiar kind of interface that they were used to using. So it didn't look too different from FileZilla. But they also gained the faster transfer speeds that come with the desktop app. So it was really like win-win-win all around. And since they sometimes work with large video assets, like large files, they really liked the boost in transfer speeds that they got from the desktop app. And this is with the older version of the desktop app. So even with the newer version, it would be that much better. Okay, but what if you're not at a place where you are using single sign-on or 2FA yet? Hopefully that's in your plan for the future, but if you're not there, you're not using single sign-on, even if that's not part of your use case, again, just like we were saying before, the desktop app is a much better experience just all around. So whether you're modernizing your authentication stack or you just want better user experience, faster transfers, start using the desktop app. So hopefully between a couple of us, you're convinced. Okay, and so this is another example of a place where you might want to move away from using SFTP because you have control over some of these processes. So another one is external users. So vendors, sometimes customers or partners, you might set them up as a user account in your files.com site, but they're external to your organization. And so specifically the external users who aren't super techy, like they don't have a lot of technical skills maybe, but they still need to send you files. So for these folks, in the past, they may have been asked to, very first thing you need to do is go to this website, download FileZilla. What's FileZilla? No, it's okay, you really can download it. And then, tell them, what is a client? It's not a client like a person, it's a client like, a piece of software. And so, you're explaining all of this. And so the first thing they have to do is like wrap their head around the fact that that it's a client, that's not a person, and I need to download this. And then they have to get their credentials, and they have to use the interface that they're just not familiar with. And so for people who are in non-technical roles, like maybe they work in a legal department or an HR department, or they're just someone who's having a bad day, sometimes that's just not easy to do. It's difficult, it really slows things down. So when you want your business to move quickly, that can be a real headache. So in this situation, we recommend just letting them drag and drop like they're used to doing on lots of other interfaces. So they can log in via the browser. So you can give them a user account on your files.com site. They can log in. They only see the folders that you give them access to. And then in order to get you files, they just select the files on their computer or on their mobile app or even on their smartphone, and they just drag them via the browser to you. And so that's the kind of interface that they're used to using. And it's easier to understand. You don't have to explain anything. You just give them the login, and then they have the browser-based portal where they can drag and drop. They don't need to configure anything. They just have a link. And then also, so this is something that we don't necessarily always talk about a lot, but because you can brand your files.com site with your colors and your logos, and we're going to give you the information on how to do that, but because they have that experience of like seeing your brand on the portal, they'll know that these files are really for you, that they're not being phished or anything like that. So that increases trust. And it also is just like a better, customer experience. And then, they don't have to ask you any questions. So, and it's just better security that way. And so one other thing to keep in mind, so if you're giving them a user account on your site, they are able to easily reset their own passwords with the same kind of password reset mechanism that is on pretty much every other website that they use. So if they forget their password, which they will, or if they're gonna misplace it or whatever, or if they have like a new person at the company who, they can just reset the password themselves. You don't need to deal with that. It just reduces setup time, support load, and confusion for everyone. And it just looks more professional. So I want to talk about Athenian. So this is another one of our favorite customers. Athenian did exactly this. They ditched SFTP for drag and drop. So what they do is Athenian provides entity management and compliance services to their customers. So they actually organize your documents for compliance and auditability. So they have customers from every industry, both technical industries and non-technical industries. And so the whole thing that they do is they organize documents. However, in order to organize the documents for their customers, they first need to receive the documents from their customers. So as part of the onboarding experience for their new customers, before they started working with files.com, they had done exactly that. They had told their customers, hey, these are sensitive files. There's a lot of legal documents here. So they had their customers download an SFTP client so that they could send those files via SFTP rather than email, which definitely is a much better option to choose SFTP. However, they were excited when they started working with files.com that they could just do this process through the browser. So their onboarding team that works with the new customers were noticing, because a lot of the people that they're working with were not technical. They were in the legal department, they were in the HR department, they were administrators. And so it was just a really difficult ask to explain how to use SFTP and all of that. So they just cut all of that out. They ditched SFTP and switched to web access for their new onboarding customers. So they create a user account in files.com. Those folks log in via the web, and I almost am struggling to talk about it because it's so simple. Like, it's just really straightforward. So, and it's just faster onboardings for them. So their team has way fewer headaches, and it's just easier. And again, those customers can reset their own passwords anytime that they need to do that. Okay, next example. So here's a place where SFTP may not be the best option, and you have the ability, potentially, to change it. So we are talking about replacing scripts, and it's because we have a lot of tools to allow you to do that. So, let's talk about scripting again. So if you're still using WinSCP scripts or SSIS jobs plus SFTP to move files around within your own environment, you're not alone. A lot of people are doing that because it is kind of flexible, and also integrating with various different systems. A lot of times these scripts are bespoke and they can do a lot of flexible things. But one of the difficulties with them, you may have experienced, is that they can become a burden as well, a support burden for you. So those credentials expire, endpoints change, they just require a lot of manual upkeep and maintenance. And so if you have a script, then you are the one who is supporting that script. So just like in Dave's presentation, if that script doesn't run overnight, you are the one getting the phone call and trying to put out the fire in the morning. So there's a couple different options. The first option is if you want to keep your current script, because there's lots of good reasons why you need to keep your current script, you can just change the script a little bit and swap in the SFTP command with a line or two from the files CLI or the files API, the REST API. So those are designed so that if you have an existing script and you're using SFTP with that script, you can just change a line or two with the CLI or the API, and suddenly your script moves that file so much faster because it's not using SFTP anymore at that point, it's using the API. So the file CLI, the command line interface app, also uses our API rather than SFTP. So that can be a good just drop-in replacement. Just like zhuzh up your scripts a little bit, and you get all the flexibility of your existing scripts and all of your processes that are built on those, but you still get like a performance improvement. And then you get the support from us for that particular part of the script. However, you can also, for some workflows, get rid of the script entirely, and this is what we advocate, which is why this lady is so happy standing on stage. She is ditching the script. So you can eliminate scripts entirely sometimes by installing a files agent. And so if your infrastructure, the agent installs on your on-premise infrastructure, and it can securely handle transfers between your environment and files.com. So you don't need to use SFTP to move a file from your internal environment to your files.com site. Because the agent is already installed in your local environment, it uses then the API. If you need to move that file to the files.com interface, it does so via the API, or, I mean, if the agent is mounted, then it's just right there. So that's much faster. And once you have the agent, then you can also use our automations, which are super powerful, and you can replicate that script, I mean, depending on exactly what the script is, but then you can use our built-in automations to schedule jobs, to move files in and out of your environment, based on folder names or on file names. And you can add our monitoring, our amazing logging, and retry logic, plus our amazing support team, all comes along with all of this. So then you can just get rid of your scripts entirely. You don't have to worry about any of it. It all just runs on files.com, and we are the ones supporting it and not you. So throw away the script. For real this time. Okay. So this is another one of our lovely customers who is doing something amazing. The Cardiovascular Research Foundation, they simplified one of their more complex workflows. So the CRF is a nonprofit that identifies, develops, and promotes the latest advancements in the treatment of heart and vascular disease. And by doing so, they help doctors improve survival and quality of life for people suffering from these conditions. So it's kind of important, the things that they're doing. So they regularly receive large diagnostic imaging files, so like really large imaging files from their partners. And so their partners send them that medical data to their files.com site. And so, but then they need to get those files into their internal environment from files.com. So what they had been using previously were a set of scripts to take the image files off of their previous SFTP solution and into their internal environment. And then from there, they would be able to process them. And they really were having a lot of pain around these scripts, so the kind of things that you might be familiar with. The scripts would break down, it just wouldn't happen. You know, a directory might move or credential changes, and so then, you know, there's lots of like manual updates required to these. And then, you know, only certain people can make those changes to the script, so those folks were getting a really heavy support burden keeping those going. So instead, what they did is they switched to the files agent, and so what they did is they used the files agent then to move. So they received the files from their partners on their files.com site, and then they used the files.com agent to move those files into their internal network. And from there, they can process the files and move them around to different locations within their internal network. So that's one of the really cool things an agent can do. If you have a complex internal network, a files.com agent can also interact with not just the machine that it's installed on in your network, but also other machines in your network. So that's really cool, because then it is moving files both into your system, but you can also use our automations to automatically move those files and like divvy them out to where they need to go using folder logic, file naming logic, everything like that. So that's like a really cool use case where the agent is helping a lot. and you have our awesome automations. So no more scripts. And it's all supportable by files.com. So you can shift the support burden to us rather than from your team. Okay. All right. One more example. So here is a situation you might consider ditching SFTP and using something a little bit better. So let's say that you have an automated process. I'm sorry, the title's a little bit wordy. I couldn't think of like a better way to like word this. But let's say you have an automated process that kicks off every time you receive a certain kind of new file to your files.com site. So either it's a file that's uploaded to a particular folder, or it's a file with a particular file name, or it comes at a particular time, or like from a particular person. So you're kind of just waiting for this one file. And then once you receive that file, that automated process is going to kick into gear. So how does your system know that the new file that you've been waiting for, how does it know that that file has arrived? So the old school way of doing things is to set up SFTP polling. And so polling is where you create a process that continually, every couple minutes, sometimes every couple seconds, this process will use SFTP to connect to your site, and it will open a connection, and it will check and see if there's anything new in the folder. And if there's not anything new, it'll close that connection, and then 30 seconds later, it will do the exact same thing, and it does that over and over and over again all day long. And if you're hearing that and thinking, wow, that sounds really inefficient, you are correct. SFTP polling is extremely inefficient because the majority of the time when it's checking for those files, it's not finding anything. Otherwise, it wouldn't have to check, so often. So usually, it's checking and it's saying, like, is it there yet? Is it there yet? No, the file's not there yet. So all of those SFTP connections waste resources, and it also increases API calls on your files.com site. So, and it's slow because it uses SFTP. It's wasteful, it's resource heavy. So instead of polling, you can either automatically place the files exactly where they need to go using remote servers, or you can instantly alert your system when the new file arrives using webhooks. So if you install a remote server to receive files, either using the agent, so to receive those files directly into your local network, or you can use a remote server to a cloud environment, we can use that remote server connection to just route that file when it arrives, just right where it needs to go. So you don't need to check for it, we're just putting it where it needs to be, just automatically for you. So remote servers are really powerful that way. Or if, if that doesn't quite work for your workflow, we also have webhook notifications. We also have email notifications as well. But you can set up a webhook notification so that when a new file arrives, it can send off a webhook to whatever system needs to be alerted of the new file. You can even send a webhook to messaging apps and things like that, or Zapier, or other processes that kick off from webhooks. But you can use that webhook notification to instantly alert the system, and then that processing can begin immediately rather than waiting for the next SFTP polling connection. So it's just a much cleaner, and it's faster, actually. And so you can be like this lady here, and you can break the poll for polling. All right. So break the poll. Don't use SFTP polling anymore. There's basically always a better option rather than SFTP polling, and we can help you figure out what that is. So, all right, so story time. This is another one of our favorite customers. Buckler Securities are a boutique financial broker-dealer, and so they benefited from this process. So they modernized their process, and it was creating a lot of noise and overhead, and it wasn't really helping them that much. So their partners send files to Buckler's files.com site, and so when those files are received, they need to get processed in the on-premise process server. So they need to get the files from the files.com site to the on-premise process server as soon as possible. You know where I'm going with this, so that those files can be processed right away. So that's pretty straightforward. But there was no schedule So they didn't know exactly when these files were going to arrive. They just knew that when they did arrive, they needed to process them right away. So they had initially set up SFTP polling because that's what everybody does. And so it wasn't ideal. So they were, polling was working. They would get notified when the file had arrived. But, it was noisy, it was resource hungry, and it wasn't as fast as it could be. So, and then also they were seeing really high API call usage on their site, which is not ideal. Instead, they worked with us and they replaced SFTP polling by installing a files agent on the process server. So now, when their partners drop off those files onto the files.com site, they just get routed directly to the agent, which means that they don't need to be moved from anywhere to anywhere. Those files just are already in the place where they need to be, which is this processing server. So there's absolutely no lag. So then they can just start processing them right away. And what's really awesome, on top of all of that, was that they were able to reduce their API calls. So they changed a few different processes, but they were able to get their API calls down by a factor of 10. So when I say that SFTP polling is noisy and resource heavy, like, we're not kidding. Like, it can use up just a ton of API calls. So if you are using SFTP polling, or even if you have a partner maybe who's using SFTP polling, we can talk to you about alternatives to that. So if SFTP is working for you, that's great. You don't need to change anything. Lots of things that are older than 28 years old and older still work awesome, like me, for instance. So just because something is 28 years old doesn't mean it's bad. It just means that it may not be, it may be the right tool to use, it may not be the right tool to use. And so that's just thinking about, is it still the right tool to use? But if there is a modern alternative, you can look into that. So again, if you are using FileZilla or any other SFTP client to move files from your machine to your files.com site, download the desktop app, start using that today. Get your team to download the desktop app and have them start using it today. So it's just going to be way easier. And again, you get that single sign-on and 2FA support with the desktop app that you don't get with an SFTP client. If you have scripts, you can either swap in the CLI or API calls to replace some of that SFTP functionality in your scripts, or you can get rid of the scripts altogether with our agent. So that's a great option with your scripts. And then it's much faster, and it's also supportable by us, so you don't need to maintain all that code. If you have partners or customers who you're going to be interacting with regularly, and they struggle to use SFTP clients to send you files, just give them an account and they can log in via the web and they can use drag and drop. It's so easy. And basically there's all of these different options, so the setup is more secure, easier to maintain, and better for everyone who touches it, and better for you, especially. Okay. So, to sum everything up, you don't have to change everything at once. Usually we say, if you want to make changes, start with the change that's easiest to make. So downloading the desktop app yourself is probably the easiest change to make because you can do it right now. Or if you're looking at processes, which process is the simplest to replace or to update. Or you can start with the thing that is causing you the most headaches, the thing that is most painful. Sometimes that's a good place to start. And we would love to help you and answer your questions. So what questions do you have? Can we get a microphone? I caught them by surprise, sorry.
Hi, my name is Ralph Gould from Velocity. I had a question on automations when you say you can mount remote servers. So one of the things with the automations, you set files been uploaded, created, whatever it might be. That doesn't work for, and correct me if I'm wrong, That doesn't work for, say, like an Azure blob or a third party because you guys aren't recording that information. So you're still on interval sweeps.
Yeah, actually, I'm really glad that you asked that question because you are correct. If you have an automation that's looking at a folder on a remote-mounted server, if that file comes to Azure Blob, like from another like route, if that file doesn't come to the Azure Blob via files.com, then you are absolutely correct. We are not monitoring that blob, and we won't trigger an automation based on that file arriving. However, if that file does arrive in the Azure Blob via files.com, so like if, for instance, files.com put that file there, or if an automation moved that file there, or if a partner connected via SFTP and that file arrived through files.com in any way, then we can actually kick off automations based on a remote server mount as long as the file action is occurring through files.com so that we know about it.
So the only other way to do it today is you still have to do, if it's not coming in that way, we have to just do the time sweep on it, right? There's no other, like check every hour and you have to use like a sync function, say over any of the file created, file uploaded?
Yeah, there might be different ways to do that. I don't know if other folks have suggestions on like, so if the file doesn't come through files.com, the best way would still be SFTP polling. So that's something where you might want to work with our support team to see if we can help you find a better process, but that's maybe a good argument for like moving all your file traffic through files.com. So. What other questions folks have? I think I saw.
Yeah, within the agent itself, do you have the ability to, sort of say, very simple question, rename a file?
Yeah.
Okay.
Based on, so you can create folders. So the question is if can the agent rename a file? So if you have, for instance, an agent mount and you have those folders and you have folder settings, then again, if that file arrives through files.com onto that mount, then we can use those folder setting rules to rename that file using the agent. Other questions? All right, cool. Thanks, everyone.